Now let's talk about the airways that you'll be flying as an instrument pilot. First, airways for IFR flight are divided into low altitudes and high altitudes. We'll start with low altitudes. Now, as it says on the legend of the IFR low altitude Enroute chart, low altitude airways are available for use up to, but not including, 18,000 feet MSL. By the way, the legend from the chart will be available to you on your FAA knowledge test. Now, the question they ask you may not, on your knowledge test, may not tell you which legend to refer to or when to do so, but it will be available to you, and if you have any question about this, look for the legend. Now, let's take a look now at what you'll find on an IFR low altitude Enroute chart. And when we get to the chart, you'll find that low altitude airways are generally Class E airspace or Class Echo airspace, and the base of those airways is generally 1,200 feet above ground level. Now, sometimes they are other than Class E airspace when they run through Class Bravo, Charlie, or Delta airspace. Now, this surrounding white area here is all Class Echo airspace. So when a low altitude airway is based on VOR navigation, you'll find that they changed the name of it to a Victor airway because that tells you it's based on VOR navigation. So this is a Victor airway, and it's based on VORs. It goes up to, but not including, 18,000 feet MSL. And you can fly these Victor airways using RNAV. Now, here the airway is shown, and it's a black line, and it has these numbers with the letter in front of it. So this is a Victor airway. The black line is a Victor airway, and the identification is shown on these black boxes all around. For instance, in this Albuquerque area, these are all airways going in and out of the Albuquerque area. So it's shown with, again, a black box with light letters. Okay, now the airways are 4 nautical miles either side of center line. Unless they're more than 102 nautical miles apart, then they become 4.5 degrees on either side. Now, even though Victor Airways were originally designed for VOR navigation, you can still fly airways using RNAV, including GPS, instead of using the VORs. Now, here's something the FAA may ask you about Enroute low altitude charts and Victor Airways, and here it goes. Keeping in mind that low altitude airways go up to, but not including, 18,000 feet MSL. Let's take a look at this airway right here. Now let's suppose you're on an FAA game show and they're going to ask you what's the highest usable altitude on this airway, Victor 16, in between Big Spring and Abilene, Texas. Well, let's suppose you're given these answer choices. First of all, they give you answer A, says 17,000 feet MSL. Well, that kind of looks good because Victor Airways go up to, but not including, 18,000 feet MSL. So 17,000 is a candidate and qualifies for the second round. Well, the next answer is B. B says low altitude airways go up to 18,000 feet MSL. They don't go to 18,000. They go up to and not including 18,000. So you can cross B off the list and send it home with a consolation prize. Now, answer C says 6,500 feet MSL. Well, that is a usable IFR altitude, but it's the minimum reception altitude for Loran intersection here, and you were asked for a highest usable altitude on Victor 16. So, answer A, 17,000 feet MSL is higher, and it is the correct answer. Now that we're done with our game show, let's go back to charts. And let's assume you want to be able to find the IFR Enroute low altitude chart that covers a certain area. Well, how can you find out which chart to use? Well, let's take a look at this excerpt from the chart supplement. This is Billings, Montana area and the Billings-Logan Airport. And if you look in the upper right corner up here where it says Billings, just beneath is a high altitude and low altitude appropriate charts that you would be using. In this case, for low altitude, you use L13, and for Billings-Logan Airport, you'd use panel D of low altitude chart 13. Now, there are also low-altitude RNAV airways called T routes or Tango routes, and these must be flown with RNAV equipment, which normally means GPS for general aviation airplanes, and they exist at the same altitudes as Victor Airways, with a base normally of 1,200 feet above ground level, and T routes extend up to, but do not include, 18,000 feet. Now, here is how T routes are shown on an IFR low altitude Enroute chart. The center line is blue instead of black, and the airway identification is a blue box with white letters. This is Tango 257, but just a little to the west over here is Tango 261, and on this portion it shares the same route as Victor Airway 27, Victor 27. So the identification box is blue, showing it's also a GPS or a T route, and it's also black, showing you it's a Victor Airway. Now, T routes using GPS may often be more direct than Victor Airways, because Victor Airways have to go right over the top of VORs that were installed in the dinosaur age, when instead of T routes, they had T-Rex. But T routes are not limited by NavAid reception or NavAid range, and can be placed anywhere. It's operationally advantageous and may be set up as a way to route traffic around busy terminal areas. Now, T routes are free of many of the limitations of Victor routes, but both types of low altitude airways can be limited by high terrain. Now let's talk about high altitude airways. Now, high altitude airways using VORs are called jet routes. They're identified by the letter J and one or more numbers like J94 right here. Jet routes extend from 18,000 feet MSL up to flight level 450. Now, IFR Enroute high altitude charts depict jet routes with black lines and black identification boxes with white letters like this J94 right here. Now, some individual jet routes may have different published MEAs or minimum en route altitudes, or published maximum authorized altitudes below flight level 450. Now, the government has also established a system of high altitude RNAV routes called Q routes. Now, like low altitude T routes, these Q routes can be flown by aircraft equipped with various kinds of approved RNAV systems, not necessarily just GPS. Now, here, for instance, is Q122 north of Scottsbluff, and Q routes look like this on high altitude charts. It's a blue line and blue identification box with white letters. Now, for offshore operations, like in the Gulf of Mexico, you'll occasionally see Y routes, and Y routes must be flown with GPS. Now, like T routes, Q routes and Y routes can also be more direct because they don't have to go over VORs, and they can be established wherever it's advantageous for traffic to flow, so they can move them wherever they need to. So now you know how high and low altitude airways are shown on IFR charts. You're prepared to make good use of them.